Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had such a great time in Omaha, Nebraska this last weekend. Folks were hungry. So easy to get into end times. Amazing how so many churches now are so hungry for the coming of the Lord. Wow, what a time to be on the planet. If you're anywhere near Champaign, Illinois, this weekend we'll be at Midwest Believers Church Sunday morning, Sunday night. Come be with us. We'll have a great time. We'll get into the Word, always magnifying Jesus, glorifying Him. So soon we'll get to see Him face to face. So with the update, we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war. Because the second coming has so many signs, like 60 some odd signs, but the rapture is signless. So if we can see what happens just after the rapture, we can kind of get a little bit of a timing. We know that the rapture is about 7 or 8 years before the second coming. But man, if you can see the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, what a layout right now. It even gets England excited every time. What a layout, watching Turkey take positions, watching Russia take positions. It really is probably more radical them getting in position than any other time I've ever seen. I know I say that, but it keeps surprising me over and over because it is so blatant. You know, used to nations would try to hide what they're going to do. Now they just blatantly say, Iran just blatantly says they're going to annihilate Israel. I love what Iran said this last week. Let's pick up with what's happened around Israel. Iran said this last week, it was illegal, what America said. If diplomacy doesn't work, we'll have to go to other options. So Iran said, well, that was a threat. Yet Iran has threatened Israel every single week, wanting to knock them off the map. And now, not only that, trying to make nuclear weapons. So much is happening that's a setup for the coming of the Lord. You had the Palestinians in Gaza do incendiary fires again this last week. This continues over and over and over again. So Israel responded with airstrikes on certain positions in Gaza. In the middle of that, Qatar is basically trying to bring food to the Palestinians in Gaza because Gaza is so interested in wiping Israel out. They don't take care of any of their infrastructure. It makes England mad as well, but it's crazy. The big thing that happened this last week, there's nothing about it in the news media here, which is just bizarre, is Israel did another airstrike right outside of Damascus. What was it? It was missiles coming down from Iran down into Syria on their way to Lebanon, a munitions base right there in Damascus. It intrigues me that, remember, Russia a few weeks ago said they're going to hold the skies of Syria and not allow Israel to do that. Well, Israel, this is the second time they've done it, and they fired missiles and took out some of those depots. It is intriguing. Syria fired back missiles at Israel, and a couple of the missiles hit right outside of Tel Aviv into the water. So they said in the middle of the night you could hear explosions going off on the northern part of Tel Aviv and northern part of Israel. So you got Syria even responding. But I love that it didn't even freak Israel out at all when Russia says they're not going to allow it. Israel's been able to. So much is happening with that, the blatant defiance of that, and the blatant part about Damascus. You know, Isaiah 17:1 says that Damascus will be removed from being a city. One of these weeks, maybe even before we're raptured, you're going to wake up and you're going to see that Damascus is there no longer. Something crazy will probably happen. They'll probably haul too much weaponry in there and something's going to explode, and it's going to remove Damascus off the map. There's several different translations of what that is, and all of them are bad. So that we're anticipating that. But right now, the U.S. is sending a special envoy to Europe for Iran for talks on the Iranian nuclear agreement, and it's intriguing. They're meeting in Moscow, then meeting in Paris. They're trying to implement a compliance with what the original nuclear agreement was, because they kept breaking even those things that they said they would abide by and subverting themselves away from sanctions. So they're still developing nuclear weapons. The amazing thing is why they're doing that is because so many nuclear watchdogs have come out in the last couple of weeks, one after another, saying Iran is literally weeks away and could be even shorter time away from a nuclear weapon. So Israel will literally have to do something. It can't allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So in the midst of that, you've got the U.S. and Israel doing naval drills outside the Red Sea, because looking at what would happen if there wasn't compliance with the nuclear agreement. America sent over a guided missile destroyer to act with Israel's Navy there at the edge of the Red Sea, so that Iran couldn't shut off oil supplies to the rest of the world. So much is literally set up for World War III. You had China go into the North China Sea in the Taiwanese Straits, took 19 aircraft there. One was even nuclear capable, and Taiwan had to send out airplanes to basically stop them, which is just amazing that China said again, if anyone tried to mess with them, they would nuke Japan. I mean, it's just threatening nuclear weapons nowadays is just absolutely bizarre. And even on the home front, you had Democratic senators try again with legislation to try to take away companies' tax-exempt status that helped Israel in the West Bank. So there's all these threats about the West Bank. And then you had NASA said there was the 1,000th flyby of an asteroid. It was a big marked occasion. There are 1,000 asteroids that have come by since they've been keeping count. So we know that the one that's supposed to come by in 2029 is called Wormwood. So what an interesting time to be on the planet. You're seeing all the things with earthquakes, all the things with a pandemic, all the things with asteroids, all the stuff mainly with Iran and with Russia, completely set up along with Turkey to do exactly what the Bible said they would do. So we look at all these things because the Lord wants us to accelerate. This is not about escaping. This is about, wow, there's the finish line. We've got to do a lot more in a shorter period of time. So we're so blessed. And all the information is because the Lord loves you so much. He wants you to see how close we are to the coming of the Lord. That's why there's so many verses about it, because He wants you happy, He wants you hopeful, and your strength will be tied to your joy. So if you're going to finish your race, you're going to accelerate, you've got to have lots of joy to have lots of strength. So we always go to the Scripture every week. Every week we go to look at what the signs are. And I know we go fast, but there's so many. We'll just hit on some of the majors. Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation that sees those two will not pass away till all is fulfilled. So we're blessed. We're that generation. But then you got the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You've got the fertility of the land of Israel. You have the revival of the Roman Empire. Even their building is in Strasbourg, France. It's identical to the Tower of Babel. Not similar, identical. So just intriguing to see those things. So you got the Temple Mount Institute. You have all these groups ready to start having sacrifices right after the rapture of the church. It goes back to 7 years of Old Covenant time, and they'll start having sacrifices again. So everything's set up for that. You have 172 different species of predatory birds. Pretty amazing. After the Ezekiel 38 war, God calls on the fowl of the air to come clean the land up. 7 years later at the Battle of Armageddon, He calls on them again. So you got the cleanup crew in Israel. So all these groups are in position. You got fish in the Dead Sea. You have foxes that showed up on the Temple Mount. You have the ritual baths around the Temple Mount filled up with water. You had Israel last year ruled by two Benjamins. You have water showing up in Petra that poured out of the middle of a rock and formed a river. Israel doesn't even go into Petra until the middle of the tribulation, but water's already showed up for them right now. So all these things, men would be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. So we have many, 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 many signs pointing to the coming of the Lord. How exciting to be living when all of these verses are coming to pass right in front of our eyes. So we're very, very blessed. But then you go from signs to signals. The Bible said the planets would be for signals for us. So you got a few years ago, blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles. Pretty radical to have 4 in a row. NASA called it a tetrad. When's the last time you had 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation. 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So amazing. Blood red moons on precise marked dates with Israel. Pretty amazing. But then after that, you had the Bethlehem Star a few years ago. I mean, hello. At the birth of Jesus, you had Jupiter, Regulus, Venus come together. Constellation was Virgo. A couple of years ago, NBC Nightly News said we have a celestial event. We got Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus. Bethlehem Star, first time in 2,000 years. I mean, you even have the Revelation 12 sign with the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, a cluster of stars for a crown, Jupiter inside her belly for 42 weeks, exactly how long a baby's in a mother, 42 weeks. And it was all showing the birth of Jesus and the rapture of the church. And that happened on the exact day, September 23rd, a few years ago, that Israel was told they can't police Jerusalem. So wow, all this stuff pointing to the coming of the King. Many, 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 many more things, but it tells us we got to hustle. So what do? Help your local church. Help your local pastor. Get the message out. This is not escape theology. This is a hustle theology. So we can see the finish line. Let's accelerate. Wow, we're about to see the King. It's amazing the protocol for the entrance of the King at the second coming. But here at the rapture of the church has to have a display before we leave. You have to be a mouthpiece. You've got to warn people that Jesus is just about to come. Doesn't have to be weird, doesn't have to be strange. But I don't believe Noah got up on the ark and said, "Is everybody okay? Is it cool that I warn you?" I believe Noah had a punch about his voice, and there was a strength to his voice saying, "Hey, get in the ark before it's too late." So we need to accept Jesus. So wow, we're about to see Him. Make sure your life revolves around more fellowship with Him, hearing the Word more, praying in tongues more, because you're about to see the King face to face. Man, have a blessed, awesome week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.